welcome to Weekly Reddit. In today's episode of /PettyRevenge, don't call me lazy. I just wanted my driveway back and my dumpster left alone. Try to cut the line? Sure, you can go before me when I'm next. Don't park in my brother-in-law's spot. No sleepovers allowed with boys, girls only. Don't call me lazy. I was recently told I should post this story here, so here goes. I was 18 and dating a dude for a few months. We got like 2 feet of snow and I was snowed in at their house. I had to spend the night. His mom was furious. She made me sleep on the couch and she blew up an air mattress and slept between me and the bottom of the stairs to ensure I couldn't go upstairs and defile her poor little innocent son, whom I'd been fucking for 3 months at that point anyway. Next morning she was still very cold and salty towards me. To clear the air, I volunteered to start shoveling. Plus I wanted to get the fuck away from her ASAP. 3 hours later, my BF and I had cleared maybe the first 15 feet of a 40-foot driveway. She sat on her ass in her warm toasty house watching us. We came in for a break and before I had my gloves off she said, "Wow, you're so lazy, you're coming in for a break already?" Pathetic. My car was parked at the very end of the driveway. I mentally said fuck this shit and put my gloves back on. I immediately trudged to the end of the driveway and spent 10 minutes freeing and clearing off my car. I asked my BF to come with me and he gladly agreed as he hated his pose mother. I went in, tracked as much snow as possible all the way up the stairs to get our stuff, her screaming at me all the while. I went back out and loaded up the car, and before I left I told my BF, "Hold on, I forgot something." I went back to the porch, grabbed the 2 shovels and one by one threw them onto the roof of the single-story house while she was screaming at me. We then drove off. He spent 3 days at my house and that bitch was completely snowed in the whole time. Suck a dick, Karen. And yes, her actual real name was Karen. Fitting. I just wanted my driveway back and my dumpster left alone. Let me say this up front. I am going to use very vague details as I don't wanna give away too much info and my lack of knowledge of events outside of my control. I just wanted my driveway back. Backstory: I have a dumpster on my driveway that I'm using while I renovate my home. There is just enough room for me to park my truck there at the end of the night. Over the past few weeks, a man I'll call Dasso keeps parking in front of my dumpster and using it for his needs. I have asked him many times to stop. This has led to him going out of his way to just be a general asshole to everyone in the area. So I put up one of those signs about parking and getting towed at the owner's expense, yada yada, took pictures of it and generally did everything I could to cover my ass when I had this pose towed. Events till now. So I had this man's car towed away. And of course, he called the cops talking a lot of BS about how this was illegal and just throwing whatever garbage he could to muddy the waters of what was really going down. The police took my side as they had been informed ahead of time about the tow. I called them first to let them know what was about to go down. During this convo with the cops, the man was being very dodgy with answers about himself. This struck the officer as being a little sus, but he had no reason to press the issue yet. Dasso however gave the officer reason just a few moments later when he reached into the dumpster to grab an empty paint can to throw at my truck while the officers sat in the patrol car writing up an incident report. Not sure if he didn't see them in the car or was just so mad he just didn't care. Either way, this leads to him being cuffed up right away. He refused to answer any questions at this point and was led away. I never saw the man again after this. What went down after the coin toss? Well, the man's real identity was found out. Turns out this guy was a sex offender that had been on the run for years, using fake names act. Not only that, but my house and his both are less than 100 yards from the school. My house is right across the road from the main drive into the school parking lot. This is a no-no for sex offenders. Turns out the man still had a lot of time left on his original charges that he was now on the hook for, and that was before all these new charges he is now facing even come into play. I don't have a whole lot of details about what he's facing, as I just moved here about 5 weeks ago and don't really know anyone to get the info or even how to go about getting it. My last home had a website that I could go to and see who was arrested and what for, but this town lacks that, so I'll have to wait for gossip to reach my ears. Gasso, dumbass sex offender, is in his upper 60s and had almost 15 years left on probation or parole still before he bounced and started hiding out. So he will be almost 75 or so before he sees the light of day again, and that's before any new charges get tacked on. Not really sure how it all works. Try to cut the line? Sure, you can go before me when I'm next. Before COVID hit, my wife and I love to cruise. 12 cruises in and very few problems. Unfortunately, many people feel they're far more important than anyone else, especially when it comes to the line at the purses, guest services, desk. Everyone has just one question, so some try to circumvent the line. As was the case with one very self-entitled woman. The line was about 8 or 9 people deep and I was third in line. Little Miss I'm So Important tried to talk her way to being first, but the guy was having nothing to do with it. She tried to get the guy who was second to allow her in, and she was starting to get all whiny and confrontational about how important her question is. She then came to me and asked to cut ahead of me. Normally I would have said no way, but looking back and seeing the length, I knew what I was going to do. I said, sure, just let me get to the head of the line. Then you can go ahead of me. She gleamed and said thank you, while standing there with a smug look on her face. She won. Guy in front of the line moved up, I'm now second. At this moment I turned to the guy behind me and offered him to cut ahead of me, making me third again. Little Miss I'm So Important saw this and asked why I did this. I said, I'm in no hurry, so I let him go next. She huffed, but said nothing else. I did that 4 more times before she caught on to what I was doing and screamed at me to immediately allow her in the line. I said, you better ask everyone behind me if they'd mind. By now the line had more than 10 people behind me. One voice behind me said, no thing way. Her jaw dropped and, knowing she had been beat, she slinked to the back of the line. When I finally got to the desk, the person behind it congratulated me for a job well done. I also got a $200 on board credit for what I did. Even with that, it was so worth it to put someone in their place. Edit, my very first award. Thank you. Don't park in my brother-in-law's spot. My girlfriend's brother, my Bill, has been seeing his girlfriend for a few months. She lives in an 4-apartment complex, with 4 unsheltered parking spots. Each tenant is entitled to use one, for her own car or a visit. Also, there are 2 special spots, under a roof with an individual lockable gate that are closer to the apartments. If you want to use one of these, you have to rent it for an additional monthly fee. Since my brother-in-law is now a regular visitor, and one of the special spots was available, he and her girlfriend decided to rent it. She would park there on a daily basis, and he would park in the regular spot. However, this one neighbor decided he could use this special spot if it was not occupied when he came home, since the gate is now open. The first time, they talked to him and he apologized. Second time, he said he was in a hurry and was just about to leave. Third time, the landlord was informed and they had a long talk about it. Well, last Saturday, when my Bill and his girlfriend arrived, neighbor's car was parked in the gated spot. No need to talk this time. My Bill closed the gate and locked it with his own padlock. Coincidentally, they decided it would be a nice day to take a trip. They picked up some things from the apartment and left for a weekend trip. Of course, they had to block neighbor's number on their phones. On Sunday night, back home, they found neighbor was pissed. His car was locked, they would not answer his calls, and the landlord didn't give a duck about his problem for THW entire weekend. No sleepovers allowed with boys, girls only. This was so petty, and I still cringe and feel bad for what I did. This revenge was stretched over a long period of my childhood and finally came to a head in my teens years. When I was a kid, my mum didn't allow sleepovers with boys. This was coming from a very young age, 6, in which we were all innocent anyways. I was super bummed about it because all friends were guys. This meant they all had sleepovers together while I was always excluded. Every time I would ask my mum, she would say, "No boys, girls sleepovers only." I eventually gave up arguing. Fast forward in high school, I'm coming to terms with my sexuality. I have a crush on a girl, so naturally I invite her over for a sleepover. Mum okays it, and when my friend comes over we end up hooking up. This happened a couple of times over the course of that year. Living in a small homophobic town, somehow word got out that we hooked up. My mom put 2 and 2 together and flipped her shit. She started screaming at me that I wasn't allowed to have sex in her household, hence the girls only sleepover rule. I reminded her that she only ever told me I couldn't have sleepovers with boys and that she never told me I couldn't have sex. She didn't really have much response to that, and I didn't get in trouble. But she enacted a no sex rule after that. It was still an asshole move of me to do that in my teens years. I was a bit of an edgy teen. I knew the no boys rule was just because she didn't want me having sex. Part of me wanted to get back at her for all those years of not having sleepovers with my friends. Too long did not read. Mom enforces a no boys sleepover rule as a kid. Backfires on her when I realize I'm gay. I follow her rules and have girl sleepovers and hook up at 1. She gets mad but realized she can't get me in trouble because technically I followed her rules. After that she enacted a no sex rule.
Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up with the best content from Reddit.